Yeah, we have Jay Brent, the son of the Dave Brent.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, yeah. Okay. Okay.
I just wanted uh, to see if he's here. If he, yes, he's here definitely. I
Yeah.
know him. And
Okay.
hello, Jay. It's really pleasure to see you. We were talking with Reto. He's from Hungary, and the other guys are from Bulgaria. And
Mhm.
which is like Hungary is in the middle of Europe, and Bulgaria is on the east part.
Yes.
And so we were talking, and he said some very good things. He's making in Hungary Reto. He's making some field days sometimes,
Good.
and here now in Bulgaria we are doing like online meetings that we just want to help the farmers, and it's really amazing that you join. And I just will say two words in Bulgarian about you, and then we can, if you want, if you're ready, we can start, because I don't want to waste your time, because I know that you are probably very busy.
Sure.
And yeah, so значи момчето, това е Джей Бранд, който е сина на Дейвид Бранд, който съм му превеждал видеа. Дейвид Бранд е за мен след Гей Браун е най-добрият Ноу Тилър, а Джей е сина му, който е супер интелигентен и супер умен. И той ще ни направи така снимки, ще ни покаже, ще ни разкаже някакви неща. Мисля, след това ще се включи и баща му, и така няма много да говоря. Който иска да пита някакви неща, извинявам се, че е само на английски, обаче наистина не искам да им губя много от времето, и след това ще направя превод просто, и ще просто си пишете ми на лични, или тук в чата напишете въпроси, евентуално, които да ги питаме. И така започва. Okay, we can start if you want, and yeah, it's really hello, and it's very big pleasure to meet you.
All right, so my dad's calling me on the phone right now, trying to pick up.
All right.
Here, so give me a second here to
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. Yeah, баща му звъни по телефона. His father, yeah. And ами какво да ви кажа друго, не знам. Джей е по принцип от тези по-скромните, интелигентни хора, които четат страшно много, така че аз всъщност Дейвид Бранд съм го слушал страшно много пъти и общо взето почти седно знам какво ще каже, докато Джей той е някакъв страшно задълбава във всякакви неща. Слушал съм му лекции за Mycorrhizae, където обясня някакви невероятни подробности, нали, детайлни неща, които, нали, общо взето е супер полезно да ги слушат. И общо взето всъщност предполагам, че ще ми е на мен по-интересно него да го чуя. Надявам се и на вас да ви хареса и да ви е полезно, и така, общо взето. Yeah.
So I had to resend the email to him with the link, so he'll try to pop up in a couple minutes.
Yeah.
All right. I could share a screen if that would be okay. Kind of talk.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
You know how?
Yes. Can you see it now?
Yeah, perfectly. I see your farm, the green.
Yes.
The green farm in a desert, surrounded by a desert.
That's what we say.
Yeah, not exactly, but it's kind of. All right.
Yep. So this is our farm. I had given a talk to local farmers about using cover crops in corn or maize and soybean rotation. So I thought it would be of interest to this group as well.
I'm sorry. Do you? I'm sorry, Jay. You have somehow the sound from the mic is a little bit like I don't know how to say. If you have another mic, or I'm just asking if you have. If not, that's okay.
We'll try to move a little closer here.
All right, that sounds quite better actually. Yeah.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, very good. That's all. That's perfect now. Okay.
All right.
Perfect. Yes, sorry.
Problem. So again, on our farm, we try to have cover crops over winter. So here we see we're planting corn actually into the cover crop that we had planted the previous fall. And all of our neighbors like to have the brown soil. So that's how we are there.
Hey, can you tell me why I don't have any voice?
Sorry?
Hey, Ian.
Hey,
You have voice, Dave. We hear you.
I don't think he can hear us. So while they're working out that detail, I'll try to keep moving. One of the things we want farmers to do are these kind of opportunities, right, for using early maturing hybrids, and that will allow better establishment of cover crops in the fall, or use interseeding, either by broadcast spreading or using airplane, which is popular here in North America. And we have to be careful with our herbicide selection so it doesn't interfere with crop establishment, and also look then at variety selection for that to make it work well, as well as our cover crop seed that will work there as well. This is a list of common cover crops that we use in rotation to corn and soybeans. A lot of times we'll use them all together in the same mix. Here we see in the corn what that spread of cover crops might look like. So usually we say around black layer, or when the corn is maturing to seed. And so we move to soybeans, and we use a small grain in front of soybeans to capture the nitrogen and provide that soil armor. Then switching back and rotating back to corn in a 2-crop rotation. A small amount of cereal grains accompanied with legumes and brassicas. So here we see it broadcast in the crop, where you can harvest through that usually with no problem. And then the next spring you have a really good cover crop stand. We plant into it still alive, and then we'll use herbicide or mechanical means to terminate and have very good establishment of corn in that residue. So that was real quick. Jog through there. I think Dad is on, and if you wanted Dad to talk a little bit more about the farm and some of the practices, the guys would like to hear a few sentences there.
Yep.
Yes, Jay, I'm on.
So go ahead if you want to share a little bit about the farm and what we're up to.
Oh, okay. We are working with, of course, corn and beans and small grains, with having cover after corn to go to soybeans. And then after the soybeans, we plant our small grains. And then after the small grains, we use an 8 or a 10-way cover to bring nutrients from the soil to the surface, and also capture nitrogen from the atmosphere, so we can, at the time we grow corn that third year, we can reduce our inputs really tremendously. We are working with learning to do some open pollinated corns, looking for a retail market to enhance profitability to our operation.
And because I just wanted to say a few things about us and what, just to give you an impression of what who you're talking to. It's like in Bulgaria, it's not a really big country, but it's the Ноу Tilling is growing quite fast in the last 2-3 years. So we are a little bit dry, maybe like Nebraska, I'm not sure exactly, but it's and we have some farmers that are like 6-7 years no till already, but the most of the farmers are really into the first or the second or the third year. So we are really like just in the beginning. We read a lot, but at the same time, our practice it's really not big. So just advices about really the first steps.
Yes, there's some things we've seen that we like to see, especially since your climate is somewhat a little different than ours here in Ohio. You know, we've worked with some Nebraska farmers, and we've seen when we put rye with a brassica that it actually holds and retains a lot of moisture, like from the dews when you have in the morning. It will actually pull that moisture down in the ground rather than letting it evaporate off the plant. And if you keep that soil covered, it will be cooler during the growing season, probably as many as 20 degrees difference between a covered soil and a non-covered soil. So just think of the amount of moisture you can conserve with that biomass on the surface, you know.
That is really amazing. It's very important when we grow the cover crop, the termination, because Jay said that you terminate it usually after planting. What herbicide do you use? And the people are afraid usually to terminate after planting. And
on our farm, we use a gramoxone, or what used to be called paraquat, and actually all that does is it acts like how am I going to say this? Like you've mowed it off. It doesn't mow it off, but it kills the top, and sometimes don't harm the root system. You know, on some varieties. Now, you like on rye and stuff, it will take the rye out. But if you're working with clovers, it actually just burns the tops off, and then they can come back probably a month later and be in that crop that you're trying to make grain out of to give it more canopy underneath the soil, you know. We also use a crop roller, and it has a chevron type pattern, and about 40 to 50% of the time, that's all we need. Just by rolling a crop and suppressing it with it.
How many days after planting usually do you do this?
We're trying to manage that, you know. If it's a season where it's mist and rain or a lot of rain each day, we're trying to manage that to show maybe wait as much as a week. But we just don't want the corn or the soybean to get up very far because we don't want to crimp that stem and hurt it, you know. But we try to run within 4 to 5 days after planting. I think the crop roller makes it a lot easier for the crop to come up rather than leave it stand. If you don't roll the crop, it doesn't mean that corn or bean will not come up, but it gets long and spindly before it can see the sunlight. So I prefer to have the cover laying flat on the surface to allow that plant to get to the sunlight a lot sooner. And I really think you need to look at your varieties of corn to make sure that the first true leaves do not come out at ground surface. We found some varieties will come up 1 inch to 2 inches before the first true leaf starts to open up. And if we can use those varieties, that helps us get through that cover.
Another way to say that is we want the spikelet from the corn plant to be very tall. So because we're looking at, you know, 3 to 5 inches of thatch in cover crop, that it has to come up, as well as the 2 inches of soil to grow through. So.
And about how do you decide what cover? Here usually we grow corn and sunflowers in the summer, and then winter wheat and canola for the winter.
Yep.
And can we make let's say give an example about, let's say if you, let's say we just finished the winter wheat, the harvest, let's say in June or July, what would be your decision to in this crop rotation after in June or July? What would you put? Would you wait until August when the very hot days ends, or would you try to immediately plant right after harvest? And what would be?
So it's common to, like say, usually it takes about a month to get your field operations complete before you're planting. And it seems to be late July or early August is the best dates to plant your cover crop. So if you need to do some weed management, that gives you that time after your small grain harvest or any ground prep things that you need to do. And then we would come back. In either case, both corn and sunflowers are high nutrient demand crops and take very similar cover crops. So the rotation would be very similar, where we would add some warm season legumes like a cowpea or a bean of some type with a cool season peas and some clovers, crimson clover, hairy vetch, very popular and easy for us to get at. And they overwinter then very well and would give you, similar to the screen that I'm showing you now, right? Very lush growth that does a lot to suppress weeds and provides a majority of the fertility that you would need. And it can be terminated mechanically. Then you could use the roller crimper. And also most common burn down herbicides would work very effectively. But we do recommend higher volumes of water, right? So
how much?
Usually
if we use glyphosate, how much would you put?
Usually run 20 gallon, right? 20 gallons of water.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
With how much glyphosate?
Probably 32 ounces for a quart.
1 liter, right?
1 liter. A little less than a liter, yeah. Also, you want to consider your cover crop after wheat is what you're going to grow the next year. You wouldn't want to put a cover crop in that had lots of nitrogen fixing plants that would be a legume crop that you're going to grow as a cash crop. In other words, you wouldn't want a soybean to follow our 10-way species because I guess what I'm saying, you need to grow a grass crop instead of a nitrogen fixing crop as a crop that you would sell,
Yeah.
That would be the situation where you're planting, say, a dry bean. If you're going to harvest beans, then you'd want some small grain or brassicas.
And it depends on the time or how you take the wheat off or the cereal off. If you take all the residue off as straw for bedding or for mulching somewhere else, I would immediately do the cover crop because that soil is going to really dry out and get hard. If you're leaving the residue there, then you have time to wait and manage any weed pressure you have. The reason we kind of wait another 2 weeks after our harvest is we really don't want our legumes like our hairy vetch and our winter peas to go to bloom and make seed, because then it moves the nitrogen that we're trying to store in the soil to the seed. So that's why we delay. That way that plant does not have time to mature, to make mature seed.
We always terminate the cover crop when it starts flowering?
Not in a corn, bean, wheat where we're going after corn the 4th year. We will let those plants somewhat mature. That's why we delay the planting date 2 or 3 weeks right after. Our wheat harvest is usually the 1st week in July, and we will start planting our cover crops the last week of July to the 1st of August. That way that plant does not have enough time to mature because cold weather comes in October, November.
And what cover crops mix do you make if the next year is corn?
For next year's corn, we will use both cowpea and sun hemp as our warm season legume. We will use sorghum sudan and millet as our warm season grass. We will go in then also with the crimson clover, winter pea, and hairy vetch, which will be our cool season legumes. We will come back in with some rye on top of that, which will give us our cool season grass. We will use radishes as our brassica normally, and then put a sunflower in there to make all the neighbors think we really got a good crop instead of a crop of weeds, you know. And with that mix, we see we can replace or lower our input costs by 75% to plant the next year's crop.
What would be your advice if you just start, if you were conventional tillage, I don't know, 20 years or longer? What would be the first steps? Would you directly go to Ноу Тил or just maybe 1 year strip till or maybe disking? I don't know, just a lot of.
If I was just starting out and you had the ability to plant 2 species of a cover crop, and well, let's take 2 for an example, like radishes and a pea, or a, you know, something round like that, and you could alternate those rows. I would put the radish in one row and the peas in the next row, and I would do that after wheat. That way that the peas would take nitrogen from the atmosphere, make the radishes grow bigger and go deeper. They have a chance to be 2.5 or 3 inches in diameter, and probably the tap or the tuber will be 22 to 24 inches long, and the root then from the tuber will be another 36 inches deep. And what I'm trying to do there is loosen up compaction from your primary tillage you've been doing conventionally. Normally, if you have a cold winter, that all winter kills because it gets too big. So in the spring, you have brown cover to plant into. Then the next time you can get your cover crop in, that's when I would go to maybe a little more diverse species, like a 4 or 5 way. And then as you get used to that and have something green to plant into, the third time that field could come back to a cover crop, I would put my 8 or 10 species in, and you're off and running, building organic matter, loosening the soil, increasing water infiltration, lowering the things you can do, increase the beneficial insect population. So then you can start thinking about taking the seed treatment away, eliminating fungicides and insecticides, going to non-GMO varieties because you don't need them anymore, and cut out 80% of the herbicide program and 80% of the nutrient program. But it's going to take a little bit of time. It just don't happen overnight, you know. It's a long-term plan that you have to just keep working with. And if the best thing can happen, if a cover crop fails, you know that you haven't picked the right one.
Yeah, sure.
Because there will be disasters, and that's how you learn, you know. But you have to have a mindset good enough to say, well, that didn't work. We need to try something else, you know.
Would you recommend starting, because I sometimes recommend always make mixtures, at least 5, 6, 7 species, but then sometimes it's hard to manage them, but at the same time, at least 2, 3 of them would work.
Right. What we see with using a single species, sometimes it works well and sometimes there's a problem. So if we put 2 with it, maybe 1 survive. But just imagine if you're putting 4 or 5 or 8 or 10. I mean, you don't have to put gobs of them in there. Yeah. But you know, and the reason we like our mix with warms and season is, and I shouldn't say it out loud probably, I'm trying to fool Mother Nature. because we don't know what our weather cycle is going to be in Ohio. We don't have a good enough weatherman, And so I want to make sure if it's hot and dry, because all the cowpeas and the sun hemp, all those take very little moisture. They'll grow if you have dew mornings with no rainfall. They like 80 to 100-degree weather, But on the other hand, if it's a summer where it's only 70 degrees all summer, those 4 plants don't grow very well. They only get about 8 or 10 inches tall, and they look really spindly, And so that's when the rye and the crimson clover and the hairy vetch and the winter peas come on like gangbusters because they're cool. So we actually end up with something growing, even though we don't understand our climate.
That's a really smart, clever strategy.
And we've just learned that by trial and error. It's not there's not a formula saying these are the ones to use. These is what we've learned to use here on our farm over 50 years of experience,
Yes. And so about the reducing let's talk about the fertilizers, because this is the first thing that we're going to reduce here, usually, also the fungicides and the insecticides. But usually we put here maybe, I don't know, 800 pounds per hectare, which is, I don't know, 200 pounds per acre.
Yeah, right.
Which is a lot, but is it a lot? It is a lot.
Yeah, there's a lot, right. You need to look at things, and I think what you have to do is you have to do your cover crops, and how I've learned to do this, how I've learned to reduce on our farm, because they tell us we can't reduce and have yields, but we can because we're doing it, So I take a cover crop, and whatever size of piece of equipment you have you're planting with, maybe I'll start with taking off the fertilizer chain or shutting the box off or something, just something so that fertilizer unit don't run for one pass, Then the next pass, I'll put it back on and try to figure out how to put half as much on as I would normally put on, And then if you want to do the rest of the field normally, so you're not going to lose your caboose and not jeopardize the whole farm, put it back on that rate. Now, you're a year away from understanding what's happening, but if you're harvesting those rows that had no fertilizer and it yielded within 2 or 3 bushel of what it did when you spent the 200 pounds of fertilizer with, if there was a 2 bushel yield loss, that didn't buy the 200 pound of fertilizer,
Yeah.
And maybe there was no loss. Maybe there was no loss at half rate fertilizer. See? So you do your own demonstrations on your farms to understand.
Yeah, that's the most difficult.
And once you visualize that cover and see that cover, the next time you can say, well, I reduced by 50% and had the same yield. Let's reduce it by 50%, or maybe we can take another 25 off and see what happens, because there's not going to be an agronomist nowhere in the world that's going to tell you to reduce because most of them selling commodities, or selling something that you need to make that plant grow.
Yeah. So if we make a cover crop, how many, if you can just generalize, how many percent legumes, how much percentage cereals, how much brassicas, just generally for a beginning, I don't know.
I would like to see, and Jay may correct me on this, I like to see about 40% grasses, about 30% legumes, and 5 to 10% brassica. Because what we're trying to do is build carbon also, So if we get too much nitrogen fixing things and not enough carbon, we knock the carbon to nitrogen ratio out of the soil. We have to keep that ratio in the soil about 20 to 1 or 30 to 1 carbon to nitrogen, or what happens is it eats up all of our carbon. If we get way too many legumes and no grasses with it, you're going to decrease your yield. because you get the microbes so excited because of all that nitrogen, they eat up all the bacteria and everything, and becomes a high nitrogen soil and low carbon soil. So it'll get hard. It'll get hard just like you beat it with a hammer.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if we look at that a little bit different, so most of the legumes are very small seeded. So you get a lot of seeds per pound or per kilo. So the ratio Dad was speaking was in seeds count.
Yes. 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 For sure. Yes.
Okay. So by weight, maybe only 20 to 30% legume,
Right.
just to maintain that balance. And then the remaining portion that Dad didn't mention, because it didn't add up to 100.
Yeah.
Like sunflowers and buckwheat, some what we call flowering species or broadleaf, and that would fill out that range very well.
Well, and you know, we've found that, you know, thinking about buckwheat, you know, we've found in Ohio, and I assume it'll do it everywhere because we've seen it all over the United States, that buckwheat tends to have a small root system, a very fibrous root system, but it has an enzyme when those roots decompose that takes unavailable phosphorus that your plants cannot use, and somehow turns it into available organic phosphorus to the tune of about 15 to 20 to 30 pounds per acre, depending on how thick the buckwheat was. We found with the sunflower, because it tends to have a deep taproot, somewhere it finds 2 or 3 pounds of zinc in the soil that's been unavailable and makes it available. So we don't have to buy zinc anymore in our fertilizer mixes if we use a sunflower as a cover crop, you know. And different species do different things, you know. We find that some of the grasses tend to bring up a lot of calcium to the tune of 3 to 5 to 700 pounds per acre, depending on how thick they are. So those are things we've learned to manage our fields with, so we don't have to be buying commercial things to make so many commercial nutrients grow.
Are you doing soil sampling like Rick Pieper, 4 times carbon, or what are you doing? Which system of soil sampling?
We sample every year.
Yes.
And we go to a standard lab to find out pH and organic matter. We go to a specific lab that uses a water-based solution, which is called the Haney test in the United States.
I know.
Okay, if you know about that one.
Yes.
Because I think it more acts like a rainfall event on the soil, and it gives us a more accurate reading of the organic available phosphorus and potash. Now, for years, we've seen our soil sample readings going up with a cover crop to the tune of 5 to 10% on phosphorus and potash, you know. So, you know, maybe we'll have a farm that we take on that has a phosphorus reading of 4 parts per million phosphorus. If we can, and they say we need to have 20 to 25 to grow corn. So they recommend we buy phosphorus to get that plant healthy. You know, we take and put buckwheat there, and by the time we take our next one, we'll see those numbers increase to around 18 or 20. And that's how we determine what our cover crops have done for us as far as bringing nutrients to the surface by utilizing the soil sample. You know.
And the Neil Kinsey, you know him?
Yes. Yes.
What do you think about?
He's a fun guy to be around.
But you didn't use this calcium-magnesium relation of Neil Kinsey. Is specialized of he looks first of all of calcium-magnesium relation, and then he makes this is the most important in the soils of his opinion. Yeah.
Yes. We used to do a lot of grid sampling, you know, like do two acres or an acre out of a field, depending on things are going, and then you might end up with 30 or 40 samples out of a field, and you spend $250 to have somebody tell you what each one of those grids have done. We did that for about 4 years till we finally figured out our cover crops. When we went to a cover crop field, we found that every grid tend to be close to where everyone was the same. Now, maybe 1 or 2 points on the phosphorus, 1 or 2 points on the potash. That's not enough for me to worry about, But we found our cover crops tend to bring nutrients to the surface, even trace elements to the surface, and make them more unified than we have found in a conventional farmer that's doing tillage.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we've quit doing grid sampling. I guess I'm just, we just found out it was too much money to spend for what little benefit we got out of it by using the cover, Any add there, Jay, want to add to that?
No, you've covered most of the things that we've learned with individual species. And just to reinforce, that your in-field strip trials are what's going to help you learn what works in your farm, in your crop rotation. So all of our experience is mainly from what Dad has described, by either shutting off fertilizer, doing half rates, doing strips of different types of cover crops, and then using our monitor in the combine to look at crop response, or using a grain cart at the end, to check yield if you don't have a combine monitor from that. So there's a couple techniques that you can do to learn things really quick. And like I said, we're in a pretty advanced system because we've been doing it, for several decades. To start out, we mentioned, start with 2 species, right? That complement, like grass and legumes, or brassicas and grasses. And so those are easy to start with, and then build that, add those different things like we mentioned, buckwheat, and some other legumes to learn those different advantages. And that helps you in your system. So in the cropping rotation that you mentioned, with corn and small grains, sunflowers, and canola, you have the opportunity for a 4-year rotation, which should really help build soils from that standpoint, because you're not running, you got plenty of years in between crops and to build that diversity. So I think those are some good options that you have there, and the ability to continually build your soils with those types of rotations and introducing cover crops in between, or even because with canola and small grains like wheat, you could add a companion that may winter kill. And so that gives you a little boost at planting with some diversity, and then would not interfere with harvest. So a couple of different things to think about with that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would you put as a companion with winter wheat or barley, winter barley?
If you could get a reddish in early, yeah, I'm just saying, don't get, if you, I don't know how cold it gets right after you get done planting your wheat. If it's cold enough to freeze the ground, but if you could have 20 days or 25 days of a reddish growing, it'll look like a pencil, about the size of a pencil, but we've seen increased yields up to 6 or 7 bushel per acre by using a pound of reddish seed, which is like $1.25, $1.50, an acre, mixed right with the seed. They grow together. When it gets to 20 degrees, they freeze off and they're gone. But we've seen a lot of increase in those cereal crops by doing that. If you have a 25 to a month's window before a hard freeze.
Yeah, we have.
If you plant it and it freezes up, then it's no good,
Yeah. Another plants that you would include, maybe some legumes or not, with
Right.
winter wheat.
Some clover, right?
Yeah.
And generally you could wait and frost seed that, and that would then grow in the spring. It would not interfere with harvest, but could provide either a hay crop, late in season, so you have your in-place cover crop if you need to do that. Or you can, primarily that's generally how, there's quite a few guys that do that here in North America. So.
But what do you mean? You say winter planting? Freeze plant? I don't know what's that.
So when you have the freeze and thaw, for us would be around February.
Yeah.
And you broadcast seed the clover on the surface. The freeze and thaw will pull the seed into the ground, and it will sprout and grow.
When there is no snow, you wait.
Yes.
You wait.
Yeah, when there's no snow, correct.
Yeah,
Right.
of course.
Yeah.
You mean the cold temperature somehow pulls down the seed into the soil?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Ah,
Yeah. If you look at the soil early mornings, probably before the sun comes up, it'll look like a sponge. It'll have holes in it, and it'll be open and be crisp. If you can go out with a broadcast seeder and throw it out, then when the sun comes out and melts that frost off, it'll pull that seed right into the ground and cover it up.
That is really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, all these things you have to learn to do with a shovel. You cannot make a visual assessment of your cover crop. I've had a lot of guys call me and say they're disappointed, so I go out with them, and they never have a shovel in their truck, So we always make sure we have a shovel, and you look, I really don't care what's on the surface. I care how my roots look.
Mm-hmm.
Last week we was in a field, the winter pea was 3 inches tall. The guy says, I'm really disappointed. I says, let's get the shovel. We dug down. The roots were 9.5 inches deep, but the plant was only 4 inches tall. So he changed his mind right away. He saw the advantage of those roots,
Mm-hmm.
So you must dig and learn to look at your roots, and look and see how well they're nodulating. And if you're using legumes, always make sure you use the right bacteria to inoculate that legume so it can collect the nitrogen out of the atmosphere.
You are also still using inoculation? Or
Oh,
not
yes.
anymore?
Yes, we still do. That's a cheap source to make sure that they will nodulate.
And what are the bacteria? So it depends on the plant, but for peas and clovers, you remember the name of the bacteria that is rhizobacteria, or I don't know, because we don't, we have people that are selling bacteria, but they don't say specifically that it's for legumes that will make them nodulate.
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can't remember the name specifically, but the rhizobia are different for different species, as you mentioned. Soybeans will not work for clovers and will not work for peas and vetch. So you have to have some cheat sheet to keep with you. Make sure you get the right ones.
Yeah.
So.
We're gonna try. What about a mycorrhizae? If we want to inoculate with mycorrhizae, what's the best way to do it? Especially in do you always use it as a seed treatment, or?
In our case, we use a multi-species rhizobia product that includes Mycorrhizae and Azobacter as well. So it's a very cross-functional product. So, and then it's again why we continue to use it, because it adds those additional benefits throughout each crop year. So.
And the real key for mycorrhiza, I think, is finding the right cover crop to use to build the house that mycorrhiza can live in. And as we look at plants, the fastest growing mycorrhiza plant we've found has been flax and oats, and then grasses like Sudan sorghum or Sudan. Those seem to be the host plants that mycorrhiza really function well in to start inoculating your soil, so you have them there, because as you've done tillage for years and years, you've pretty well eliminated the micro, that product out of the soil.
You put them on the seeds always?
We allow those seeds to be the host plant for the mycorrhiza.
So yes, we apply a dry product to the seeds, or we include it in the liquid fertilizer that we apply in trench on the seed.
You are doing field tests in this case?
Yes.
Own field tests.
We're not measuring microbial populations. That's not something that we are actively testing for, but it's something we could do, but not of interest to us right now to document that.
What about the fungicides and the insecticides? Because sometimes that's one of the worry. A lot of people are advising to prevent spray, which actually usually have a negative effect. What would be the advice when how to decide, how the people to decide whether they really need?
I think, in my case, I think it's a time frame where if you can get a cover crop in there for at least 1 or 2 years, you can eliminate the fungicides and insecticides. We haven't used any of those other than on small trial basis. 100% of the farm has been fungicide and insecticide free for 10 years, except where we do a trial where a guy will say, I got something that's really going to make you more money, and we're willing to try it, you know. But we try it on an acre or 2, not on the whole farm. And the interesting thing that we found since we've had long-term covers and really extremely healthy soils, but anytime we add a fungicide or insecticide or sometimes even seed treatments for corn, we will see loss in yield, which they cannot fathom. Now, they just don't understand why we have a loss in yield when we do that. But our soils are so healthy that we don't need those things to protect the seed as it's growing.
Yes.
So to reiterate what Dad said, we start with the cover crops, and then in your next crop rotation, look to reduce insecticide, especially because, again, most insecticides are broad spectrum, and you get the good and the bad, and the bad comes back faster than the good. So, and then we look to eliminate seed applied insecticide, especially, so no neonicotinoids. We have been planting, especially soybeans, which, is not part of your rotation much, but soybeans without any seed treatment has been what we think helped our soils the most with the mostly insect and bug population to improve that. And then in corn, the best we can to acquire seeds without neonics and basically bare, naked seed as much as we can. So, and a lot of that treatment is going to be dependent on your conditions at planting. So if it's cold and wet, then you'll need fungicide. But we try to delay planting until it's warm and dry, and we don't need it. So that's the key issue there is altering that concept, right, of planting and putting yourself in the best situation for success.
When we go to Ноу Тил, there is the saying that we just have only one operation, and that's the planting. So is it really important? To my opinion, it is, but the timing of planting. I mean, really even if the planter is not good enough, even because sometimes here the people say, oh, we don't have no-till planters, we cannot go no-till, but then we have some people that, quite a lot of people actually, that just go with a regular planter and they just plant directly without any tillage or whatever. So, and it works, and I think it works because they somehow managed to plant in the right time.
Yes, right. You're absolutely right. Yes.
So how to decide when it's the right time? Let's say in the spring when we plant the sunflower and the corn.
I guess my thought on that is I want it warm enough so that plant will germinate and grow within 3 or 4 days.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, our people here think that conventional ground should be between 45 degrees and 50 degrees. I like it to see 58 to 60 because in 3 days we can row the corn. Guys that plant corn in cold soils don't see them for about a month. You know, they just won't come up because they just don't have warm enough to germinate that plant, you know. And well, if it takes more than 3 or 4 days, I begin to wonder if the planter worked right, you know.
Do you have, so what about the residue on top? When, let's say, sometimes we have a lot of residue, or is it good to put row cleaners? I know you don't use them for sure, but then what about the first time and the first steps? And sometimes the people, they just want to change to make their oat planter, make it to work as an Ноу Тил planter, because some people don't have enough money to buy a new one. And then, yeah, really huge thanks, Jay. And it was really pleasure and help. And yeah, just about the row cleaners and the coaters in the planters.
I do not like row cleaners, but you know, for starting off, I think people's used to looking at brown soil, so I'm not opposed to leaving a little 5 or 6 inch area brown. The only problem I see with that, when you move the residue away and you are in the cycle of reducing herbicides, or maybe not using any, guess where the weeds grow? In that little band you cleaned, you know. But it makes people feel better, they think they work better. I think it's just more of a hazard. They're too darned expensive to own. We've bought enough of them. I have bought every brand anybody ever made. And, you know, we'll have on a 12 row planter, we could have 12 different row cleaners to evaluate them, you know. And you pull them about 700 feet and you finally figure out, you throw them away and put the fluted coulter back on, and it works just as well, you know. So it's all in your mindset. But I think a fluted coulter is all you need. And I really don't care how thick the residue is, as long as it's green or totally brown, you know. It can't be light blue or it can't be yellow, because it's like a piece of spaghetti you're trying to cut with a knife. It just pokes it hairpins that residue. And anytime you hairpin residue in the seed slot, whether it's a drill or a corn planter, that soil will dry out too much and the seedling will die. So we need to make sure that the apparatus will actually cut that residue like a knife will cut a piece of bread, you know.
Oh, true.
That makes it successful.
Nowhere in between, really green or really brown.
Yes, right.
Just another question from Peter. He has greetings to you.
Yes.
He asks about the norm. I mean, how many seeds per acre usually you put when you grow winter wheat, if you grow winter wheat?
Okay, if winter wheat and small grain, well, it depends on the small grain, but most winter wheats and most small grains like barley, triticale, spelts, were in 990,000 to 1.1 million, dependent on that variety. We try to get them planted 1.25 inches to 1.5 inches deep. We're also putting on 1.5 gallon of a non-salt liquid fertilizer on the seed, because we're trying to get some nutrients really close to the seeds there, and that's the total fertilizer program that we'll use.
For the whole year.
For the whole year, yes.
All right, that's per acre, yeah?
That's per acre, right.
Okay, then about the corn and if you go sunflowers also.
Corn, we're looking for, I like to be at 28,000 to 31,000 seed plants. In other words, between 6 and 8 inches apart. That's what I try to go with. If we have a variety that tends to have an ear that will elongate, a flexible ear, we'll be at 28,000 because it will get longer. It'll stretch when the plants are not close together. If it's a corn variety that has what I call a fixed ear, and most of your GMO varieties today have fixed ear corn. In other words, it makes a 3-ounce ear, which means it's about 4 inches long. So it don't matter how thick or how thin it is, it's a 4-inch ear. So that's where we go to 31 or 32,000 at planting time to do that, you know.
But I've seen on the picture you are doing also twin rows. It's correct?
It's a twin rows, yes. Yes.
Always, or only tests?
It's a test that we're trying now.
Right now?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay. But you are doing also contracting. I've seen that you do you have a interseeding seeder?
Yes.
You are doing contracting also for farmers?
We do a little demonstration work, but that's about all, you know. Yeah.
Just tell us if you need to go, because we really don't want to I know you are so busy and we're so happy that you're here. Just don't worry if you also need to go.
If I really do need to go, but if this will work out, we can do this again. If you got more questions, just feel to contact Jay or I, and we're willing to spend time with you. Any questions you have or problems you might occur, feel free to email us, and we'll try to work that out.
All right. Thank you so much. Maybe we can do it. Have a nice day, Dave.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Pleasure. Really big one. All right. Yes, they're amazing. Reto, what do you think?
Yes, they have a lot of experience. Yes.
Yes, a lot of experience, and Dave is really give courage to the people. I mean, when I hear him talking, he's really like, I don't know.
How much rain they have?
In Ohio, I don't know, maybe between 500 and 1,000 millimeters, 1 liter per square meter. I think. I don't know in Ohio, but it's cold there. It's cold and it's.
But are you translating this, or how do you make?
I will after the meeting. I'm recording it, and after I will translate it and subtitle. Put a subtitle, and then the other guys. Yeah, the other guys can. You want to make another meeting with you again, or if you want, we can continue with you now. It's up to you.
You are doing the program.
I don't know, because maybe next time you will be busy. So maybe if the guys wants to ask you something because you're here. Момчета, здравейте! Искате ли да го питате нещо? Рето, той от Унгария и така вече 10 години и малко повече се занимава. или да се включите за нещо друго. Горе-долу те, момчетата от щатите тръгнаха, защото трябваше да тръгват.
Как се номерата?
Това трябва. Изморени.
Градят ли?
Да, Пет, не знам кой е Пет, ама се чу нещо, дали по погрешка си пусна микрофона или нещо искаше да каже. Ако искате да кажеш, да, включи си го пак отново. Yeah, and what do you think about what they said, Reto? The guys from Ohio.
It's interesting too that they said that after the barley or after the wheat they are waiting 1 month. Huh?
Yes. To me it's also interesting.
Yeah, I know that is also the opinion of a lot of people, because if you seed it immediately, then you have the risk that you have to roll it in the autumn. This is correct, yes.
Тука не мога повече, брат. Аз се изгледам, какво стана, гати?
Чакай.
Петко, ти ли си, бе?
Аз съм да, ама не мога да нещо не мога да се оправям. И сега влизам и нищо не чух до тук, ама... Да.
Да, те тъкво пък си тръгнаха двете. Има едно момче от Унгария, ако искаш нещо, може него да го пише.
Ще гледам повторението, за съжаление.
Ще ти го пратя, да, като го преведе или то.
Няма малко.
Да, нищо другия път ще има друг гост и така. Да, говорим тук за сидбата, като женеме пшеницата, дали веднага да сеем покривни култури или да изчакаме малко. Нали, той американец каза, че те изчакват 2-3 седмици или малко повече, за да не се осеменят семената.
Аз миналата година точно това направихме. Аз женех и след мене вървеше сеялката. Обаче, понеже беше много... Ти чуваш ли ме?
Да.
Обаче беше много сухо, дълго време и семето просто се повреди, изглежда. Или нещо го изяде, не знам.
Ама ти кога си засял?
Веднага комбайната жени ние сеехме отзади.
И е било сухо, твърде сухо.
Обаче излезе супер рядко и царевица сяхме, и сорго сяхме, и покривни култури сяхме и нищо. Веднага след комбайната. Сега, тя миналата година беше такава малко особена. Не знам, тая година пак ще пробваме сега.
Да. Рето, само да го попитам нещо. Рето, how was the year last year in Hungary? Because here in Bulgaria it was maybe the driest year. I don't know. It was so dry. There were some people that have maybe 500 kilograms per hectare of wheat. Sometimes a little bit more, but it was really dry.
Yeah.
How was in Hungary last year?
Yes, the same. Yes. Was very difficult because the first seeding corn, plowing corn, was very good in start of April, and in the middle of April, 5.5 weeks after there was a germination. In May 20 is coming out the corn, and then I seeding 7 centimeters next again. I was not sure that all corn is coming, and maybe 100 population of 100,000 is coming up, and this was, but in the summer times was 200 liters of rain, and this was enough to grow. It was a very high corn because the population was high, but the yield was 3-4 tons. But but the average of the corn after plowing was quite good, and this was a lot of min-till or no-tiller said, "Oh, what we are doing wrong. They have good yields and they are plowing, and we don't have any good results. This was for the first year very special, yes. But like Brent says, you have to wait on the temperature. This means that the last hectare, end of April, an absolute 67,000 population. He said also 60, or I think 30,000 per acre is about 65, 70,000. I mean, this is correct. Yeah, it's the same here. Yeah.
And when do you plant? When you're gonna plant the sunflower and the corn this year?
This year?
Yeah.
I think I have to wait. But the next week, the 15 degrees. I think end of April.
Yeah, you're gonna wait, yeah?
Yeah. We have to wait.
Yes.
In black soils, cover black soils, and now in the same case, the veg is growing still. Also, I can wait. Maybe yes. But
you have veg that's growing.
But if you are a contractor, then you have a lot of farmers. Hey, I will planting. You have to explain it. Yes, you have to wait. This is the reason that you have to make own tests. Then you can show it here. If you don't wait, this is the reason you have to wait. This is very important that you can explain it why you are doing so.
Yes. And how much fertilizer do you put normally in Hungary? And I mean, not so and generally
less than the average. I'm because my opinion is the water is the limit, not the fertilizer. The water quantity is the limitation, not the fertilizer.